What's up, Read My Mind Radio family? Can you believe the summer is almost done? Usually, that would also mean we'd be wrapping up the Flipping the Script season. Not this year. Today, I'm bringing you the final FTS bonus episode. As a reminder, each of the bonus conversations were used in the What We See episode, where I linked discussions about visual hallucinations, trust, and blind participation in audio description. Hopefully you check that out and dig where I'm coming from. I decided to share these semi-raw conversations because the three gentlemen, Carmen Papelia, Colin Van Ushelen, and Andrew Slater, had lots of good information and ideas to offer. I call it semi-raw because I did just a bit of cooking or editing to make it a little easier to digest. But these episodes aren't representative of what we usually do here at Read My Mind Radio, meaning there's no narration, no analysis, sound design, or music. Today's episode features Andrew Slater. And by the way, shout out to Andrew, who was recently featured in a Washington Post article following his public request on TikTok for audio description of the Alabama Brawl. The result proved to be some awesome examples of creative description. I'll link you to the article over at this episode's blog post at readmymind.com. Now check this out. Since we're in the middle of celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, let me drop another reference for those who know. Now, Read My Mind Radio is this podcast's name. Andrew Slater is his. I'm T. Reed. It's like that, and that's the way it is. Read my mind. Read my mind. Radio.
My name is Andy Slater. I am a sound designer, composer, and accessibility person professionally. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a middle-aged white man with dirty blonde hair, a full red beard with some gray. Right now, I'm wearing a red t-shirt with white lettering that says, "I am not Daredevil." One of my favorite personal traits is that my left eye turns inward, so I see double a lot, and I've got big, bushy, wizard eyebrows.
Two things. Number one, love the t-shirt. Just letting everybody know, right? Do they stop you and ask you, excuse me?
I just point to the shirt.
So sandy blonde hair and a red beard.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. It's, when I was a kid, what was it? Strawberry blonde, I believe, was the term, which was kind of a reddish blonde. And then my hair got more brown. But I'm a ginger from, like, the ears down. You got the salt and pepper beard, but mine's, like, salt and cayenne. You know
Okay,
what I mean?
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like...
I don't get too much into this, but briefly tell me a little bit about your relationship with disability.
Oh, gosh. Well, my relationship with disability... I, like a lot of visually impaired people that maybe their sight has gone downhill gradually, took a while to not necessarily, admit or accept my disability, but to realize that I was disabled. I realized when I was a kid I couldn't see, but I didn't really know what any of that meant. It was the 80s, right? It kind of wasn't until I was a full-time cane user, which was about 2009, when I started just never leaving the house without it and kind of fighting with that stigma of having the white cane and people messing with me, telling me that I'm not blind or I'm, faking it and that kind of thing, and realizing that I'm not going to be able to avoid or ignore this. So I started becoming more of an advocate for myself and still not even necessarily knowing anything about people with other disabilities other than blindness and my own relationship to the lived experience of other people that I've met. And I'd say like about 2014, 15 or something, I met some people local to Chicago that are involved in Bodies of Work, which is like a disability arts culture sort of organization that does a lot of arts events and, some support. And they work with through the University of Illinois Chicago Disability Center there. And I met somebody named Carrie Sandahl and Sandy Yee, who are both disabled scholars and artists and stuff. And they were like, you got to come and meet some of our folks. And so I met a whole bunch of really cool, sort of rowdy, radical, disabled people, and was like, these are my people. I can swear and drink and be just myself and say, screw this and screw this person and all that other kind of stuff, and just learning about ableism and then the aesthetics behind being a Crip and that sort of thing, which made me realize, you know what, man, Andy, you are who you are. Just keep doing that. Since then, I've been a loudmouth for myself and others, really big on access for everybody. I collaborate a lot with people with disabilities different than mine. And then, of course, other blind, visually impaired folks. So now, I, could have said 20 something years ago, I'm 48 now, maybe, 20, maybe even earlier, I would have been praying for a cure every day. And, now it's like, I'll wait. I'm happy with my life. I have a career doing what I do, and a lot of it is based around my lived experience and my own disability knowledge, and being cured isn't as important as it once was.
Awesome. That was a great answer. Every time I hear someone who has the what I'm going to call now the luxury of being around a disability cultural center,
Yeah,
I'm just like always fascinated, man, because I've never been in that space, like physically. I'm involved with disability culture online, but it's like, wow, that just sounds fantastic to be able to just be in that space physically.
Chicago's got we have a bunch of different resources and groups. I mean, even like the mayor's office of people with disabilities have some real radical, cool people in there, not just like people that pity who their clients are. And like the mayor's office isn't like that. And there's also a place called Access Living, which is not at all like that either. Bodies of work and like the Chicago disability art scene here it's just so dope. Everybody here is so supportive. Not one person would have like a gallery show or a performance or anything, like a reading or something that wasn't accessible. Nobody does an art show that doesn't have image description. Nobody does a performance or theater that doesn't have audio description or ASL or CART. Often there's like sensory chill rooms. We all got each other's back, and I think it has to do with a lot of people that like were involved in that sort of like disability rights and advocacy in art and stuff like in the 70s and 80s. But you got a city, not up in the mountains.
Yeah.
We got a lot more people.
Yeah.
We're in a place that's much more mobile. But yeah, these kind of spaces, I've run across them like even internationally, and usually it's like you got the cool people in there. Like if you're going to like a blindness convention, it's cool, but the biggest problem is that there's an agenda and there's no chill time.
Yeah.
These spaces are wonderful, and even like virtually, but like having that personal local connection is like, this is real important.
Yeah.
And it's a total privilege. You're right. It's a total privilege.
Tell me a little bit about your work, how you came to work with sound and everything that you do.
I was like 15 or 16, right? And I got a Tascam Porta 7, like multi-track cassette recorder. And I was in this really horrible industrial punk band. I was like singing, and my parents wanted to buy me an instrument for whatever reason. And I was like, I want this tape deck. And I got that, and I started messing around with like, doing sound collage stuff, and more like what I found out to be like, music concrete, sort of like, using a bunch of like found and appropriated sounds I took from like sound effects records and audio books and TV. I used to draw and paint a lot when I was a kid, and when my vision in high school started getting to the point where I could no longer do what I wanted to do, I got discouraged. But then I realized like, oh, I can just make some weird sound art stuff, without really knowing what that was. And so I started doing that. Eventually it was time for me to get up out of Milford, Connecticut and move away and go to college. And so I moved to Chicago to go to the School of the Art Institute because I had a sound department. I learned all about audio, more so on the creative side than the vocational side at the time, like using a lot of like analog synthesizers and early samplers, and learning on reel-to-reels and going through like ADAT all the way up to Pro Tools, and then, a whole bunch of other stuff. I realize now that my work was, informed by my visual impairment, but not about it. And I dropped out of college, and then I went back like a decade later to get that degree, and kind of picked up where I left off, but started thinking more about like my disability because my vision had gotten, I guess, worse. Started also thinking more vocationally than creative, like paying more attention on how to maybe go and record a band in a way that was more organized and more professional than whatever I was doing with my dirty 4-track in some basement, right? And I started getting more into sound design for like film and videos, collaborating with some other, with some artist friends of mine and doing stuff, recording a band that I'm in, and started experimenting with like, how do you make a psychedelic funk band sound the way that it should by yourself without really knowing what the hell you're doing? And I figured that out, right? And it was like, oh yeah, music is cool as long as I have like complete control over it. At that time, I was just doing what I wanted to do and then having a really hard time navigating Pro Tools, which I use. I was zooming in a lot, magnifying, and never even like tried to use it with the screen reader because I wasn't even trained in that. And eventually I did. I got training from this program called IC Music on how to use Pro Tools with voiceover. And my workflow was like super fast and I get all this stuff done. And I started realizing that I no longer have headaches from zooming in all the time. I can just get all this stuff done so quickly, and started thinking, you know what? I really need to consider this more as a career and not just weird Andy stuff. I started doing a lot of field recordings with my cane, going from one place to the next, using these sounds to activate acoustic spaces and just do these kind of weird collage sort of things composed from these sources, and then realizing that I don't know anybody else that does this. I don't know any other blind folks that use their cane sort of like as a sound maker or an instrument, or even just to kind of end up using like the acoustic space as an instrument itself. And since I realized that Shure Microphones makes an app that's accessible on iOS, that's when I started doing field recordings again. All that digital stuff, like all the early Zooms and everything like that, where everything was digital and I could no longer see that little box and menu dive and stuff. I was kind of like, you know what? I got the Shure MV88, plugged it into the phone, walked all over the world with it, and made these recordings. And thought I was happy doing that. Doing really, crappy jobs, but getting Social Security at the same time. Then I kind of found out about like ambisonics and like immersive spatial audio stuff for like VR and extended reality and all that other stuff. Decided I wanted to go and get a degree at Northwestern, and so I went and did that in the Sound Arts and Industries School with a focus on this sort of like immersive, more media art sort of stuff that is a medium itself that's still growing and progressing, and then wanting to work in that and finding out all of these like access barriers, finding workarounds and such, but then realizing that it would be really cool if I learned this and then got into industry, and as all of this tech and all of these like, this metaverse or whatever they want to call it now, as that grows, I want, want access to kind of grow parallel with it. So in my current job, my job, not like my personal private commissions and stuff, I work for a company called Fair Worlds, and I do, sound design stuff, whether it's from like user interface, like UI, like bleep blorp, sort of donk donk kind of things, like you press the button and it makes that sound kind of thing, to composing music, to sound effects, to voiceover and dialogue editing and all this stuff for our apps and videos and whatever the projects may be. And then also working a lot on like spatial audio and applying these to the apps, where if it's gameplay and the audio is spatialized, it's kind of easier for a blind or visually impaired person to play these games based on where the sound is. All those kind of things. Being able to work within the industry where we have clients and we have some of the companies that we work with using their software, beta testing their software and stuff, having the ear of those people and those companies on how important access is. Like, you could make your thing accessible and all you got to do is this. Having those conversations, and sometimes they go somewhere. Sometimes we just got to show them like, no, here, it's really, really kind of easy. You just really need to know what you're talking about and trying to get in there as a creator, and then also as a consumer of like, this is accessible tech and these sort of things, being both like, trying to play video games, but then also trying to make the video games kind of gives me this perspective that not a whole lot of other people have. But then some of the other stuff I do is like for my own art commissions. I'll do stuff for performance and gallery. I exhibit a lot. And then I'm also doing like accessibility audits for some websites and museums and stuff. And then I'll also work on creating like access content, like image description and audio description for like film and museums and that kind of thing. So it's like that is also still a big part of like my art practice. My art is now like becoming access for somebody else's project, but then also for other people's products. Our last project, this app that's launching next week called Space Time Adventure Tour. It's like it's specific to the Seattle Center. It's about like the 1962 World's Fair. My sound designs are all vintage, retro, sci-fi, like using the theremin and then all these robot sounds and all this like really fun sort of stuff and, you know, cool jazz and surf music and stuff. All the stuff that I used to do in the 90s at school or even as a kid, I'm now getting paid to do this. I was always a kid who was like making these sounds just because, you know, I'm undiagnosed ADHD and such. But now I get paid to do that. It's really important and it's really cool. And it's like, man, how did I do this? Oh, a lot of it has to do with the fact that I decided to go to grad school against my, well, at the time I was like, this is going to cost an arm and a leg. I don't know. This is going to be really bad. This is going to break me. But I went and, you know, the place I work for now is where I had my internship in 2020. So I've been there for like 3 years and yeah, this is wonderful. And I wish that more blind folks have these kind of opportunities. And I think they're there. I think we just need to get that tech right to where it is and then get people that like education and training. Like at IC Music, I learned Reaper too. All the key commands conflict with my Pro Tools memory. So I know how Reaper works, but I chose Pro Tools, but it's like the Reaper community is huge. And these are things that, I think if we get more and more of these sort of tools into blind people's hands and, get them to be the creators. Cause, I don't want to say we're the experts in sound, but I would trust a blind person with sound more than I would a sighted person. And I'm biased, but I truly believe that. So I'd love to see more people get these kind of jobs. That way I don't have to take everything that's offered to me because I'm afraid it'll never get done if I don't.
Tell me about your first experience with audio description, first as a consumer.
I was thinking about that the other day, like what was the first film that I ever saw in the theater, and I don't remember now. But I do remember my first experience was like Christmas time, I want to say maybe 20 years ago, maybe even longer than that. The Foundation Fighting Blindness used to show It's a Wonderful Life with open audio description on TV, whatever channel. And I always thought that was wild. I thought that was great. At the time, I could see well enough where I didn't think that I needed the audio description, but I paid a lot of attention to it. It was an old movie where the sound was not this big bombastic Michael Bay mess. The audio description didn't really mess with the sound of the film, and it kind of like elevated over but still mixed in kind of thing. And I really took to that. And I think that one of the first films I saw in the theater had to have been, I want to say 14 years ago, whatever it may have been. The movie theater made me give them like my ID or something like that. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm digging this. In those early years, and I guess still to this day, you still got to always double check with the theater. Like, does this thing work? Do you have the right one? Give me two. But like the listening experience hasn't really changed much other than I think the quality of the audio description is better. I still have to cover an ear sometimes too in order to like hear the description. But I can go and do that stuff with my family, It might have been something like Captain America movie or something like that. That's why I was loving going to the Marvel and then Disney movies and stuff like that, because it's like I know that their audio description's on point. Like Pixar, they really kind of champion that stuff early on. This stuff's on point, and it's always going to be there. So, okay, brand loyalty to, corporate overlords. There we go. It's like I love Apple and I love Disney and Marvel and such because I feel invited and I could use it. And then, I kind of got into these opportunities with working with other artists, navigating like, hey, Andy, how do I do this for my own work? At the time, I didn't really know if there was this book of what to do and what not to do. So I just started being like, I don't know, this is art. Let's be weird. You can be subjective, man. Like, make it another art piece and play it parallel or whatever. Keep experimenting. The ACB audio description project, really great examples there. Love that database and stuff, but I've also come across people citing that as the end all be all, and it's like, yeah, it's to the point. It just totally depends on what the project is. One of my favorite experiences is watching like the video game awards or the game awards or whatever that thing was called like 2 years ago. And they had a described stream, which was live, and the woman reading it or narrating it was just having a blast. Here's an animation of Mario, and like, oh, and Mario's on a turtle. Oh, and then laser, like that kind of stuff. But then they had like a category for most accessible game, and I think that's when The Last of Us 2 like pretty much won everything. But the fact that they had that was kind of an audio description joy for me. That was like the next level of, oh my God, audio descriptions, in the movies. And then here's a game that's accessible. It's a little too damn hard, and I gotta like, read a book on how to play it. But here's the Game Awards taking this thing seriously, and and trying to get gamer culture involved in it. It was like, a real cool step.
You mentioned that you were sort of invited to start thinking about it from the perspective of a creator creating audio description. Can you talk a little bit about the roles that you fill in the process of creating AD?
My roles originally just started kind of as a collaborator or an advisor on projects. I wasn't comfortable with maybe recording my voice. I'd work with other people to write stuff down since my vision is impaired. Sometimes it's a boundary, sometimes it's not. There's a guy locally named Victor Cole who does a lot of like audio descriptions for local performances and like award ceremonies and all these other cool stuff that the Chicago disabled arts community employ him to do that. Started talking to him about his process and like picking up on that, and then realizing that my role as a blind person to create this is probably going to be different than how Victor approaches it, which is cool because that means you have like more voices and more opportunities to give different perspectives of stuff. And so there's some like performance artists and dancers and choreographers and stuff locally that were like, we want to do this live, but we also want to like pre-record some stuff, mess with the stereo sound for AD and kind of move the AD around in like an open audio description sort of situation, which I think is cool because I wish I could control where I wanted to place the AD when I'm listening to it, right, in the stereo field. And then doing sound design within the AD. So kind of going from that direction of making sure that the people that I work with understand that access from the get-go is the way to do it, especially when you're coming around with like audio description, right? It's like, think about the amount of space that you can take up and how much you can maybe need to cram in there with the AD. As long as it's either on your mind or even just part of the script or something like that, then it'll just be so much easier to complete, as opposed to like, oh no, we got to audio describe this thing now. Here, you got 3 days kind of thing. And I've been in those situations, but I've also been in situations where I've had a very long time to kind of digest and work on stuff. So first started off as me being like an advisor, and then like a collaborator, and then helping produce and edit and mix AD tracks. Maybe as early as like 2017 or something like that, I started doing this kind of stuff. But at the end of last year, got the opportunity to write and record the audio description for a feature, and that was a film called The Tuba Thieves by Allison O'Daniel, who is a deaf, hard of hearing director, and that thing debuted at Sundance, and so that was really cool. A great experience because 95% of the film, the dialogue is ASL. So like my wife is autistic and I'm visually impaired, and we wrote the AD and I narrated it. And I was able to hire these 3 disabled voice actors to read basically the subtitles of the captions and kind of, bring them into this, where they had done some of this work before, and they're all actors and performers and stuff. but never for something that was essentially, I don't know, everybody is disabled on this thing. So it's like, yeah, we brought, we're all showing up as we should. And so what was cool about this film is that this film is like the sound itself was so incredibly descriptive, and all very referential, and all sounds that I think so many of us would get, that the actual audio description that I read and recorded was real minimal. And there's a lot of silence in the film, so I kind of shut up. It was like, oh, I have to make these decisions now. This is a weird, experimental, sort of almost documentary style film. I have done so much like experimental audio description sort of stuff with, like, I don't know, layered voices and sound design and weird poetic sort of approaches to stuff. And I could still bring some of that energy, but certainly didn't want to, make a huge mess out of it. And I'm happy with how it worked out. It was really cool knowing that as it travels around on tour, it's playing in theaters that offer audio description, and all the promotional stuff that I see for it, it says, audio description is also available, and also has open captions. So it's really this kind of like cool thing where it's like, hey, here it is. We're all here, right? People ask me if I'll work on their films, and it's like, it's so time consuming, as you may know, especially if you're asked to do everything. The literacy of this sort of like audio description, these other access points, a lot of the times people come to me not knowing enough. And it's like, do we want to sit here and have a 4-hour meeting of me explaining what it is that you need to do? Or do you want me to do it all because you still don't understand what it is I need to do? And then when it comes to like compensation, it gets kind of hairy, But I mean, there are a lot of people that really want this, filmmakers, especially disabled filmmakers. But for whatever reason, people are afraid to do it. It's funny when I see, other disabled artists and filmmakers and stuff afraid to do this because they don't want to mess it up. It's like, look, I understand that, but we have the same, lived experiences on a lot of situations, right? And just think about it like that. It's like, experiment with it. It's common sense, I honestly think. You just got to watch, like, a handful of different, films with audio description to really get what you want to do. I don't want to have to explain it a million different times. I know I sound crabby, like crabby old man over it, but it's time consuming. And, you want me as a consultant or an artist or what? Because there's a different pay rate.
Yeah.
That's
very true.
You know what
that's
I mean?
Very true. Absolutely.
I hate to sound like capitalist about it, but it is kind of
it's
like,
your time.
Man, it's my time.
You said that you and your wife wrote the AD for the film, so you were participating in that process. You were a writer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah. We watched the movie, and then we kind of went. We didn't have a script for this, so we kind of we watched it. We took notes, put it on the time code and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a process that other people do, but we sat down here and we put it on the big monitor, and based on how Tressa would describe what's on screen, sometimes I could see it because a lot of the movie is slow. We'd take notes of what's on screen. We'd go off some of the notes that the producer gave us. I would just kind of reword it, or edit it so it was more interesting to kind of match the energy, especially the energy of these captions. These captions were out of control, awesome, and weird and abstract at times. I didn't want to be just normal sort of insights and as interpretations as to what was going on screen, but then also using like my own artifacts of my vision also, where it's like I got tunnel vision, so I can see like what's up on the right side of the screen, and I could focus on some weird thing here, and then Tressa would point out what else was going on. And it's a cool film. It has people talking about when Prince and the Revolution played Gallaudet University to like a whole hundreds of deaf folks.
Oh wow.
And and there's like there's these photos, because there was no film, nothing but like photos of it. Being able to describe these photos, like there's one, I think it's black and white, I don't know, it's from the Purple Rain tour.
Mm-hmm.
On the left is the band rocking out, and you can see that Prince has his like white Stratocaster up high, and he's just jamming, and you know he's wearing purple even though it's black and white. And then to the right is like it's like hundreds of deaf people all signing "I love you," with the index, the pinky, and the thumb up.
Yeah.
And like being able to see that, spend time just like even zooming in, like pausing the film and then zooming in. Like that photo and another one of Prince where he's just, giving the I love you sign with this, standing next to this kid, this huge grin on Prince's face where you're just like, man, I got like all emotional. I was like, how do I describe this? Because this is just beautiful. And it's like a still photo on screen for 5 seconds. And that's something that I realized, like, this has got to be really, really tough for people when you have like this wonderful photo that you want to spend a lot of attention on, and you got like 5 seconds. If
you know what's crazy?
Yeah,
I have a Purple Rain shirt on right now.
You know what? That's not crazy. That makes a lot of sense. It's like, of course.
Yeah.
I don't really know the process of people, like down the line where you have, a sighted person kind of write it and take notes. And then I know blind folks like Robert Kinjin who like takes those notes and kind of writes it. And then somebody else like reads that or edits that or like whatever that chain of events is. Yeah. I just kind of was doing it intuitively and thinking like, this works. This works for this application of a weird art movie. And that's the thing, is a weird art movie. And then you have these other elements where it's like, I have to be serious because this is some serious shit. And I don't know how people that do that sort of thing more often than I do professionally, like, I don't know how that works. I don't know if the studio's like, nah, don't pay attention to that, but you need to pay attention to this. Or if people are just given, a blank check to go and create it however they want.
No, I think it's at first. I mean, there's a combination, right? There's the decisions that they're making, and it's following the plot, but it's somebody's decision. I think what changes is the approach, right? So you were mindful of the tone of the film,
right,
and following the aesthetic of the film and all of that. And I don't think, especially if we talk about mainstream AD, right? It's just about the film. And I'm not saying anything bad. I mean, there's levels to this, right? The good ones they're putting in some time and figuring out what the plot is. But I think some of them that I've spoken to, at least, really do, similar to you wanting to describe that Prince picture. There's often those times where they're like, man, I wanted to spend a little more time on this, but it's sort of a side thing, and we just can't do it.
Yeah. And, I mean, when you got a broader, mainstream audience, you can't get super weird, right? Yeah. I mean, you can, but one of my favorite audio description moments is Deadpool movie, which has a character, Blind Al. She's not played by a blind person. She's played by Leslie Uggams, who is a wonderful actor. So Deadpool, so he's a jerk, and it's a really raunchy film. And so he goes to Blind Al's house. She's talking, and while she's talking and clearly not seeing him, he lifts up a trap door on the floor, and there's 3 items in there. One is a pill bottle, another is a bag of Coke, and another is a gun. Deadpool opens up the hatch, and there's a bag that says Deadpool's cocaine, and then there's a gun, and then there's a pill bottle that says the cure for blindness. He takes the gun and the Coke out, shuts the door, and I'm laughing my ass off in the film, and my wife did not know that that's what that pill bottle said. So there's these sort of things where it's like, I'm glad for the comedy that was put in there, right? And that's when I realized, like, oh, not everybody gets these details.
Yeah.
There's the show My Flag Means Death, which is a funny movie or a funny show about, pirates and stuff. There's a character called Calico Jack, and there's a seagull named that they call Olivia, and he's like floating away in the water, and he's talking to Olivia, and he says something stupid, and then the audio description says Olivia gives him the side eye, and it's like, that seagull's not giving him the side eye, but that was a great use of, nailing down the tone of that thing. And I want more of that.
When you're creating AD and you're working with a filmmaker, what role does trust play in your process? I think of this as with AD, like as blind people, we're forced in a way, we have to trust. We have to trust that this narrator, this writer is giving us the information that we need. As blind people, we trust that our technology is giving us that information that we need, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like as creators, especially around audio description, we're not given trust. I don't feel like it overall. We're questioned when it comes to blind folks doing AD. We're very much questioned. We see that right now. There was this whole certification, this whole thing about blind writers, like figuring out if we are allowed to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way I'm interpreting it.
Yeah. Let's say, like in my situation, working on the Tuba Thieves with my wife, right? We there was no NDA, right? We actually got complete trust, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's like, say you got to sign an NDA. People are like, well, I don't want this, this other person that's going to help you, this like sighted person to help you work on this. We don't want them to leak these secrets either. It's like, well, have them sign an NDA. Have somebody within your studio work with the blind writer. It's just another case of like, they don't trust us to do something for us. That's whack, and it's like, they don't trust us to the point where you're going to be underbid to somebody that knows how to type it, like somebody that can do like the text to speech thing, or somebody who's a voiceover artist or actor or whatever and gets all these commercial gigs and stuff and just kind of like, oh yeah, no, I can totally write audio description. It's just what's on the screen with no training. It's like you still need to know how to address this. The fact that this medium of the industry isn't yet, I guess, run by us. The people I know involved are, it's probably just it's just a different side of things because I know them all from being blind, and they, they're not just like, here's a gift. It's like, hey, I made this in community and collaboration with blind people. If I'm sighted, there were blind people involved in this, where, a lot of the times you feel like it's like, oh, what, you don't like the sound quality? Oh, you don't like how it's written? Well, you should be even lucky that we're doing it, like that kind of thing. I don't like that attitude. I feel like people don't trust us with anything. People don't trust that I could cross the street. People are like, don't even trust that I can tie my shoes. Wait a minute. Let me ask you, sighted people, do you look at your shoes when you tie them? Do you look at your teeth when you brush them? Because that's just weird. But that's the answer people give me. But it's like, so what was cool with working with Allison O'Daniel is that since she's deaf, she's a disabled artist and filmmaker, she just trusted that we would do what was best and that we would do it and it would be cool and creative and not some rote sort of boring ass thing. And so like we got that trust because the person who hired us was cool. I don't think I could say that somebody from Paramount or whatever would sit down, meet me and be like, yeah, no, you know what you're doing. I trust that you'll get it done, because studio people are used to giving notes, right? and they want to have control over everything. It's just like, man, just let us do this. We'll get it done. We all realize that we don't want to send out some jalopy sort of audio description out for our community because that's just a sellout move, or just cynical, like, I was under the gun. I had to get this done in a day. And it's like, yeah, well, you could also say, no, we need more than a day. A job is a job, but it's also kind of like we all have our convictions, and all the people I know that work in AD just like will keep that in mind. When you're doing work, like, who comes to you? Who in like the studio chain or the production chain hires the audio describers?
There's usually an AD director. Usually that would probably be their title. That's the person who's sort of making the decisions. They're serving as a project manager at that point. And so they're assigning it to a writer, they're assigning it to a narrator, et cetera, et cetera. For blind narrators, there's still that level of trust because not everybody wants to work with blind narrators. And some of them use the excuse that they have specific software that they use, for example, where maybe you have to dial in, and whether it be to download the script or whether it be to use the recording. Some of them, I think you can record right there, even remotely or something like that. But whatever, they say this software isn't accessible. And so, we know that's not the only way to get something done, right? Because these other places, you don't use the software. You
mm-hmm.
email me a script. I send you a link to the file that I just produced for you. It's not a big deal. That's the excuse.
Sighted people are so narrow-minded where it's like, yo, if this was a disabled person, they'd be like, yo, you know how to adapt. You know that workaround, right? It's like, I know you can't see that street sign up there, but you know how to get around whatever's going on here. And maybe it'll take you an extra day. Maybe you'll get it done sooner than any other, those folks in those positions don't understand those aesthetics, right? They don't understand that way of life. Yeah, and that just kind of hurts.
Can you talk about like your thoughts about sort of experiencing the world non-visually? But and when I say non-visually, I'm not coming from the place where I'm trying not to use the word blind or anything like that, right?
Right.
I'm coming from that place where specifically you're not censoring vision. So, for example, like the piece that you did where you specifically had the image description and there was no image at all. That was like not censoring that vision.
Right.
That was just totally saying, no, this is how I experience it.
Yeah.
This is how you gonna experience it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, look, if I tell you that this is what's going on, this is what's going on. That piece is like, I wrote down a description for a painting that doesn't exist. It was just something that was in my head. A lot of blind people may not be able to, I talk about color and stuff like that, some folks may not have reference points to and that sort of thing. But it's like, that kind of work is meant for a sighted audience. Talking in their terms, using color is basically like an access move so that sighted people could engage in the image description for, the invisible ink. They can see like, yeah, you can kind of have fun and do weird stuff when you're describing things. So it's totally like visually centered for that. But then when I do descriptions of some of my sound work, it's never visual. I did this recording, what I did, texture, smell, touch, vibration, and emotional sort of stuff with a lot of metaphor, because that's how you gotta talk about sound sometime. But I still think visually sometimes and describe things with sight in mind and image in mind, but that's mostly just for communication. We've all trained ourselves to use sound for navigating and cooking and whatever our daily life is. I rely and trust my ears, obviously more so than I do my vision. I have all these like weird like artifacts and like flashes and like hallucinations and stuff like that. I don't care anymore. I used to care that I'd bump into stuff. I'll go to the bar that I know where everybody knows me, and I'll know that they'll tap me on the shoulder or say my name when it's time to order, right? And if I go someplace and I'm ignored, then I'm ignored. I'll do what I can, but it's like I try not to rely on my vision, even though sometimes I do. I have my eyes open and I might be seeing something, but it doesn't always process, right? So it gets kind of like psychedelic and weird where there's lights in that corner of the room, but I kind of see a blob. I kind of see that. It still doesn't help me with the perception of where that corner is, or if that's a person or a Christmas tree or a can of dog food. I go Mr. Magoo style kind of thing and just like bumble around sometimes and figure it out, knowing that this is normal for me. A sighted person might be, watching me like, what is this crazy blind person doing? They're going to break everything. I better make sure that they don't knock something over. When in reality, it's like, I'm pretty nimble. Like, I'm a big dude, but I'm pretty nimble. Like, the only time I bump into stuff is at my house because I'm overconfident. Where I'm like, I'm like listening to my phone. I'm cracking open a soda, and then also telling the Echo to play, Run DMC or something, right? And then I'll walk into the wall. I hate feeling like I'm on display, to the public. But at the same time, it's like if I didn't do anything, I'd have no joy in life, like there's no shame in the cane, no shame in me, doing what I gotta do. If I come off with having a chip on my shoulder, that's not a chip on my shoulder. That's just my reaction to ableism.
When you were describing like how this painting didn't exist, sort of reminds me of talking about these hallucinations. So not necessarily that blob that could be the Christmas tree or the really big can of dog food, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, real big, like Costco, like Kirkland dog food.
you experience hallucinations as well. Talk to me about what you see.
Okay, and I'm gonna preface this with yesterday was 420,
Oh, yes.
and I live in a state where it's legal. Carmen visited Chicago a couple weeks ago, and he gave me these THC capsules that he made with a strain called LSD, and he was like this. He's like, this to me inhibits some of the hallucinations I have at times when they may not be happening, because like we both have RP, and sometimes our eyes aren't doing all of this. Like right now my eyes are doing some things, and I'll describe that. He gave me this weed, these edibles, because he's working on some stuff where he's trying to create a strain that kind of emulates the hallucinations that he gets. Him and his brother also has RP. I went to band practice, and I had one of these Carmen edibles, those little capsules, and it cleared my vision up.
Oh,
Like
wow.
the issues I was having. Yeah, I was like, oh well, okay. It gave me like this like kind of awareness of the space of the room, and it sometimes like feels like my field of vision is widened, and I'm like really confident, or I like get up like, oh, I don't have my cane, but I'm outside now. What happened, right? I don't necessarily like taking edibles because they will totally obliterate what I am seeing, and not in a fun way. Stuff like when I'm exposed to a lot of light, I guess my pupils are dilated. So I'll get this sort of a lot of after image. You walk into like a camera flash, right? For me, that will stick around forever.
Yeah.
I get these strobes, right? These sort of strobe flasher sort of things. And then everything is kind of like I would say like an electric deep purple, or some weird kind of green, like not neon, but kind of like the Ecto from Ghostbusters and stuff. And I'll get these other things that I've seen like my whole life that they're kind of gray, purple, green, whatever. This weird thing that's like the shape of like a Cheeto puff, like a C kind of thing, and they move from one eye to the next. And when I close my eyes, I still see them. And it's kind of like, how is it going through both eyes? Is this something where my brain is shooting off and, like, I don't know, weird electric shocks into my eyes? I have no idea. I don't consider them like interruptive anymore as I did when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I was really, really, really night blind, right? Now it's kind of flipped, where I'm totally photophobic. Like light, I hate it. I hate the bright light. I'm like a gremlin or something like. When I was a kid, I think it's something where your color perceptors or your light perceptors can't do what they're doing. So I would get these weird visions that kind of look like fireworks or something like that, right? Like when you rub your eyes real hard, people experience those kind of colors, or like, flashes or fireworks, sort of explosive, sort of like weird shapes and stuff. Those just kind of pop up for me, and it's cool. But if I'm trying to do something where I am needing to use my vision, it just pisses me off. They do kind of become a hindrance, and I know that Carmen invites them. He likes them, but for me, sometimes it's a reminder of, oh, well, that thing you were going to do, now you're going to be distracted, and you might as well not do it, because it's totally distracting.
Okay.
But sometimes they're cool. I like doing mushrooms. I do those every once in a while, and I do a lot of writing. I've done a lot of like sound descriptive work, writing about what I hear in my own work, and then some other artists have commissioned me. And with that, it's like I have these different hallucinations. I don't know if they're different. I don't know if it's something where I'm having these same kind of effects that I always have, but psychedelics start to make them move and take shape and dance around and all this kind of stuff. And that's cool. Yeah. You're not a narc, right?
No.
I can tell you this. Because if you're a narc, you got to tell me. That's like legally.
Yeah.
I find it really, really cool, and it really kind of like makes it so like, oh, I can actually enjoy this.
Yeah.
So these are just like, I say like artifacts of like my retina probably imploding. But sometimes, back to the giant dog food, that's like my brain trying to process what I'm looking at. But sometimes there'll just be stuff that I think I see that isn't there, and that's kind of new, like within probably the past 10 years. I don't know if it's the Charles Bonnet stuff. I don't know if it's shadow people. I don't know if it's like there's a tear in the space-time, whatever. But sometimes there's stuff that's there, and sometimes there's not. I'm into it because I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. So you question? Do you have to question a lot? Or you know when? Okay, I need to question this. Well, obviously, a big old can of dog food like that, you're gonna know.
Yeah. I'm just gonna put that in my bag and go home with it. Like, this is mine. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, if I'm by myself, a lot of times I won't question it, and then it's like let's say it's a street at night, and under a street lamp, there's something, whether it's like looks like it might be a box or a person, and it's not moving. But I'll just assume, well, it's supposed to be there, whatever. Maybe that's my neighbor. And then I'll like walk 5 feet up, and that thing isn't there anymore. Was my brain trying to say that it was there when there really wasn't,
Yeah,
or am I being hunted? You can read all the Oliver Sacks in the world, and he'll explain it as plain as possible. But I still don't know if it's my brain or if it's my eyes. It's cool, but it's also disarming at times.
Yeah.
But I'm a strong dude, I guess. I've never experienced any paranormal anything.
Yeah.
So like I don't know if that's real or not. But
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a lost memory.
It sounds like you do sometimes think a little bit more about them as opposed to just, okay, this is just something medical happening with my eye.
Mm-hmm.
Like with my Charles Bonnet, for example, and I know it's not because somebody ruins it for me and gives me the medical explanation. But I'm like, wow, should I be looking at these shapes and these things that I'm seeing and really thinking about it? How does this relate to my mood right now? Wait, is this some sort of internal communication? Am I talking to myself through these images? Like, am I trying to tell myself? So I get into it sometimes, and it's quite enjoyable. Again, mine is Charles Bonnet, and I never heard anyone who has that experience of Charles Bonnet, because usually it's those people usually report little monsters type images and stuff. That sounds terrible. The only time I've experienced that was like waking up from a bad dream. I could wake up from a bad dream, and then I'll see a face, and it's usually like a creepy looking. It's not a real face, right? But it's like a creepy looking animation or something like that. And then it might be like you described, sort of neonish, electrified, and it's just, and then I just stare at it, and then it goes away.
You ever have sleep paralysis?
Oh no.
Oh, dude. Yeah, when I was a kid, it was kind of bad, and I would experience something very similar to that, but I think it was in a dark space where like the color receptors or whatever things would swirl around, and then like maybe there'd be a shadow of a tree, and I would just be like sleep paralysis, but I'd be seeing this stuff. I mean, that sounds a lot like the situation where if you wake up from a bad dream and there's like this image that you see that looks like a face to you, and you were dreaming about maybe falling through the ice, but then there's like this face. It's like, are you being faced with this being that's controlling your mind? I mean there's like, when you start thinking like that, I mean, because thinking scientifically on what all of that means is whatever, but you think holistically, or like how your body's reaction is. Maybe it is your mood, maybe it's your body communicating to you. Like, how the hell does science know?
No, I definitely think there's a relationship. I know there's a relationship between my body and what I see, because when I'm tired, it's hazy, it's very blurry. And when I'm wake right up from, like, if I took a little 20-minute cat nap, it just starts to get just really clear and vivid. It's like, oh, okay, I'm ready to go now. I'm good.
Yeah, when I'm tired, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, my everything's hazy. And, I started thinking, like, is this like a visual migraine? I heard people talk about those. So I started taking like prescription strength aspirin or ibuprofen or whatever, and it cleared it up. So I'm like, wait, maybe this is a migraine, or maybe I just convinced myself that it's clear. It's really psychedelic. It's also disarming, but then at the same time, sometimes you feel like you have control over it and you can change it.
Yeah.
And I can't explain it other than that. It's like, so many of us have these experiences and they're all different. But like, are they based in memory? Are they based in like the degradation of your the cells in your eye or your brain, or the substance that you may have ingested. Who knows? But I mean, it's definitely something that would scare the hell out of somebody who's never experienced that, to wake up and see that someday.
Do you have synesthesia by any chance?
I do. That's another thing that I never really get to talk about. The only person I ever talked to about synesthesia was this woman I went to school with. Their reaction was numbers. They would get these hallucinations or visions of different numbers. And with me, it doesn't happen as often, which I'm bummed about. You just see colors, or you sense movement and all these things based on sound and music. Like when I hear something, there's a color in my head. I don't necessarily see an image all the time. Sometimes I do, but it's like, I was listening to Underdog by Sly and the Family Stone earlier, and it's like every time the horns hit, that was like a yellow, like a fire yellow with like an orange base. And then that drum came in, and it was kind of like headlight white pulsing on that beat and that sort of thing. So like these kind of like sonic qualities and these timbres, to me, sometimes relate to color. And I don't even know if it's the right color, because I do have some color blindness. But I've done stuff when I used to work in the studio, especially when I was recording my band. I'd be in this room for hours, and sometimes other people would be in there, sometimes not. And I'd listen to stuff like, what does this mix need? This guitar needs to look more like a paper bag. I need that brown. I need paper bag brown. And like, that's what's in my head.
Wow.
And so I'd mess with it, like with the EQ or whatever kind of processing, until I felt like that color was attached to that sound. It's how I started thinking, and I was like, I wonder if I knew how to blend color and I understood color more, if that would affect how I mix or listen. It's pretty cool. It's really wild.
So when you were looking for the paper brown bag, you were just sort of changing EQs, you were playing with different ones, or do you know to go to certain places?
At that point, I was just messing with EQ, and I was using the EQ on the board, like the parametric EQ. I was trying to do it physically because this place had some outboard stuff. But sometimes, if I'm like mixing something, I'm putting like a reverb on it that's color coordinated, as far as I'm concerned, like space, whether it's like a real space or it's like, a synthetic space, like a reverb. There's color. I was working on something earlier, and I was eating an ice cream sandwich, and I was listening to the reverb chain, and I was like, this seems cold, because sometimes you have these other sort of like emotions to music, or sensory reactions. I finished the sandwich, and it no longer seemed cold, but then it was like, I was thinking about it as like a strawberry in a pool of lavender is what I heard, this reverb chain of just this like drum and bass silly thing that I was doing. And I started thinking about, maybe I got to figure out what colors go with strawberry lavender, and then try to mix the rest of it so it looks in my mind like that. And if that would be at all interesting. It's like Pharrell did a record that was all based on his synesthesia. I don't know if it was a Neptune's record or if it was just
Kanye.
Pharrell.
I think Kanye is also supposed to have synesthesia.
Yeah. And weirdos, that happens. But a lot of times people don't even know what it is. You can have any kind of like sensory like experience, like referential to anything, but then when it's like you start getting deep and thinking about it and studying it, it's like, this is actually kind of magic. And really fun. I wish that there was a more natural way to kind of activate my synesthesia, but it seems now it's really, maybe I need to eat more of these ice cream sandwiches, but sometimes it's like few and far between.
Talk to Carmen, make you a
right, yeah. You get some of that LSD hash oil or whatever in my sandwich. Good Lord. Like in 2013, I was doing a lot of sound work and mixing based around that, because it was really active at the time. And I don't know if it's something where I'm just not allowing myself to do it. I'm so overworked and stressed about stuff. Like maybe that's the thing. Maybe I need to just chill, and I can let my body communicate the way it wants to.
Yeah.
And like, Andy, have some fun here. Just listen to this Isaac Hayes record and just
that's
feel the color.
That's funny that you chose that you said Isaac Hayes, because we were doing. I do some classes with Cheryl, and we did this thing where I wanted folks to describe. So we talk about audio description in a creative way, and so I said, well, I want y'all to describe a song, right? And so I used Isaac Hayes because I love it. It always works for me. I hung up on my baby. You know, the Ghetto Boys use it or whatever. They're so different. And that was part of why I chose that song, because that same riff, the interpretation, when you hear it in the Ghetto Boys, it doesn't give you that same feeling as it does when Hung Up on My Baby.
No, their narratives are so much more descriptive than what was going on at Stax. You know.
Yeah. I wish I had those colors, because I always try to match it with what I'm seeing, and I don't find any sort of relationship except for the clarity. That's the only thing that the relationship for me is, that clarity.
Clarity is something that, I mean, that's definitely something to strive for. You know, it's like, you got clarity. I mean, damn, I wish I had more clarity in a lot of things.
Where can folks check out what you're doing, stay in contact with you, or all of that?
My Instagram, TikTok, website, YouTube, everything like that. This is Andy Slater.
You're on TikTok, huh? What are you doing on TikTok?
Being I had a viral video like last year, like million something, like maybe 3 or 4 million views.
Yeah, see, I don't do TikTok. What are you doing?
It was footage of a guy in the street in the middle of the night telling me I wasn't blind and I shouldn't be using the phone. I grabbed it, and so it started a huge discourse of people thinking that the whole thing of like, how do you use TikTok if you can't see, like all that stuff, where they all came out of the woodwork where it's like, yo, Google is free. My life is not a Q&A. I'll put up fun videos of like, me messing with like access stuff, or just like me walking around videotaping my cane on different surfaces and making sound.
I love that. Making sound on surfaces. Salute to Andrew Slater. I appreciate you, bro. Remember, we'll be back in September, and it's always the second and fourth Tuesday of the month when we're publishing episodes. All right? Peace.